So good evening and welcome to Planet Word. I'm Ann Friedman. I'm the founder and CEO. But more relevant tonight is the fact that I am an old friend of Michael's. He was actually the best man at our wedding back in 1978. I'm sure you'd believe me if I said that no one could have predicted worldwide success and fame for a political philosopher. But that would not be true. Of course, we knew back in the 70s that Michael would make a difference in the world and would influence political philosophy. In 1975, he was named a Rhodes Scholar, attending Oxford's Balliol College. That's where my boyfriend Tom introduced me to Michael. Tom and he had known each other as undergraduate students at Brandeis, but even before that, they had known each other as 8-year-olds growing up in Minnesota. Since then, Michael has become renowned for his books and ideas and for his legendary justice class at Harvard, where he's been on the faculty since 1981. Justice has been among the most popular undergraduate courses at Harvard for more than 2 decades. It has been filmed and made freely available online and on TV, and it has been viewed by tens of millions of people around the world. And I think we're going to get a taste of why that's so tonight. Michael's books have addressed the most vexing moral and civic questions of our time. They include the tyranny of merit. Can we find the common good? Democracy's discontent. What money can't buy. The moral limits of markets. And justice. What's the right thing to do? In lectures, he uses the Socratic method, which leads to involved students, back and forth discussions, and open-ended debate on the most serious ethical issues of our time. Recently, he's tackled such contemporary issues as the ethics of chatbots and social media, immigration, climate change, and violence against women, using precepts from moral philosophy to guide his audiences to gain new insights into how to approach these contemporary problems. And we'll get a taste of that tonight, too. Michael has huge numbers of fans in Asia, where his lectures fill arenas as much as soccer games do. He has given prestigious lectures in the UK, France, and Spain, and now they'll add Planet Word to that list. He served on President Bush's Council on Bioethics, and he's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science. You might think it would be intimidating to discuss anything with someone with such a broad intellect and curiosity. But Michael is also just a great friend, a dad, a husband, a world traveler, a baseball fan, and a former Little League coach. And he's also someone who poses questions that spur you to think deeply about everything important. Michael invited Tom twice to teach a course with him about globalization, where they politely and respectfully hit each other with their metaphorical purses, stemming from their divergent views about the costs and benefits of this global phenomenon. So you can ask him anything, and it'll be fun. So we're in for a treat as Michael shares his ideas about how we can tackle issues civilly. And to begin with, Michael asked me to tell you that he's going to share a clip of a discussion from his justice class. So thank you very much, and we're so glad you're here.
Over the years, thousands of students have joined me for an ongoing debate about the moral decisions we face in our everyday lives.
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story.
Suppose you're the driver of a trolley car. Nikolai, if you didn't think you'd get caught, would you pay your taxes?
I don't think so. Do I think I should be able to bid for a baby? I'm not sure. It's a market. I mean,
in a situation that desperate, you have to do what you have to do to survive.
You have to do what you have to do.
You got to do what you got to do.
What do you say to Marcus?
I've never been in a class like this before, where they kind of asked you to really think and consider the moral dilemma. I've never had such a fun class in my life, you know?
We turn to the great philosophers of our past for answers. Do you think Bentham is wrong to add up the collective happiness?
I don't think he's wrong, but I think murder's murder in any case.
Yeah, well, then Bentham has to be wrong. If you're right, he's wrong.
Okay, then he's wrong.
All right.
Right.
Thank you. Well done. And we turn to the present to challenge the reasoning behind the moral choices we make every day.
I think that what happened in the past has no bearing on what happens today, and I think that discriminating based on race should always be wrong.
I just want to say that white people have had their own affirmative action in this country for more than 400 years. It's called nepotism and quid pro quo. So there's nothing wrong with correcting the injustice and discrimination that's been done to black people for 400 years.
Even effort depends a lot on fortunate family circumstances for which we can claim no credit. Raise your hand, those of you here who are first in birth order. I am too, by the way. Mike, I noticed you raised your hand.
Taking justice was really an eye-opening experience for me. Everything that you've thought of up to that point becomes questioned, becomes challenged.
The purpose of sex is, one, for its procreative uses, and two, for a unifying purpose between a man and a woman.
Your beliefs are your beliefs, and that's fine. But civil union is not marriage within the Catholic Church.
What is the right thing to do?
People have been arguing for millennia, really, and there's still not one definite answer. And in ways that makes philosophy impossible, but it makes it beautiful at the same time that we're still debating similar questions.
And the reason they're unavoidable, the reason they're inescapable, is that we live some answer to these questions every day. And now, I have the chance to invite you to join us as Harvard opens its classroom to the world.
Thank you, Anne, first of all, for that warm introduction, and including my credentials as a parent and as a Little League coach. I would like to come back to Planet Word to speak about every other week, just if I could hear that. Would that be all right? Thank you all for coming. Our civic life isn't going very well. We're deeply polarized, and we're not very good at reasoning together about big questions that matter, especially questions that have to do with values, with ethics, with disagreements about what makes for a just society, what to do about inequality, what we owe one another as fellow citizens. Now, there are reasons for our inability to reason together. Part of it has to do with the empty terms of public discourse. What passes for public discourse these days consists either of narrow, arid, technocratic talk, which inspires no one, or when passion enters, we have shouting matches, partisan food fights, where people argue past one another without really listening. Now, what's the source of it? I think there are many sources having much to do with our politics, but I also think that we in the field of education have a responsibility to do a better job of equipping students to be citizens, to be effective democratic citizens, which requires cultivating the art not only of reasoning together, but of disagreeing with civility and mutual respect, and cultivating the art of listening, not just listening for the words, but listening for the reasons and the moral convictions underlying the differences of opinion that we have. We're not very good at that, but I don't think it's hopeless. I think it is possible to cultivate these capacities and these virtues. What I'd like to do tonight is not offer precepts or rules or principles for conducting hard conversations, because I think that's the wrong way to approach it. We don't learn civility and mutual respect. We don't learn the art of argument by first being given a kind of handbook or a set of rules. That's not the way I teach in the classroom, and I don't think that's the way we could cultivate a better kind of civic discourse in public life. What it requires instead is a kind of practice, a guided practice, which is something that can take place in the classroom and ideally also in public life. So I would like to share with you in that spirit some examples of public discourse, of disagreement, sometimes robust and deep-seated disagreement, some from a classroom setting, others from public settings, and see what you make of them, really to invite you to a discussion about what seems to go well and not so well when students and citizens generally take up their disagreements about hard ethical questions. So, are you ready to join me in sort of discussing these questions? Because this isn't me giving precepts and rules. It's really inviting you to a conversation about what works and doesn't work in practice and how that might inform our attempts to elevate the terms of civic discourse. We began with that introductory video that Anne introduced from the justice class that Anne described, that I've been teaching at Harvard for some time. And from that quick, seemingly seamless, smooth, untroubled overview, it might seem very easy, easier than it actually is in practice. So what I'd like to do for the next clip is to show you that class. And you remember the young man who was making an argument about same-sex marriage. He was against it on religious grounds. And there was a quick reply. What I would like is to show you the longer version of that discussion, which was a little bit less smooth and seamless than it may have seemed at first glance. Now, so if we can look at clip 2.
I think that for people like myself who are a Christian and also a Catholic, the purpose of sex is, one, for its procreative uses, and two, for a unifying purpose between a man and a woman within the institution of marriage.
You have a certain conception of the purpose, or the telos, of human sexuality, which is bound up with procreation.
Right.
As well as union.
Yeah.
And the essence of marriage, the purpose of marriage as a social institution, is to give expression to that telos and to honor that purpose, namely the procreative purpose of marriage. Is that a fair summary of your view?
Yeah.
Who has a reply? Yes. Hannah?
I'd just like to ask a question to Mark. let's say you got married to a woman, you did not have sex with her before marriage, and then when you became married, it became evident that you were an infertile couple. Do you think that it should be illegal for you to engage in sex if children will not result from that act?
Yeah, I think that it is moral, and that's why I gave the twofold purpose. So like a woman, say, I think older couples can get married, a woman who's beyond, who's already had menopause, and who can't have a child, because I think that sex has it has purposes beyond procreation.
I hate to be uncouth, but have you ever engaged in masturbation?
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer that. You can.
Well, yeah, I think all right.
Just a minute. No. Why? Make your.
I'd like to respond to that.
No, I think. Wait. Look, we've done pretty well over a whole semester, and we're doing pretty well now, dealing with questions that most people think can't even be discussed in a university setting. And Hannah, you have a powerful point. Make that point as a general argument rather than as an interrogative. Okay. But make the point. What's the principle that you're appealing? Okay. What's the argument you have in mind?
All right. Well, biblically,
put it in the third person.
Yeah. Okay.
Rather than in the second person. Make the argument. Go ahead.
Okay. Biblically, masturbation or onanism is not permissible because it's spilling your seed on the earth when it's not going to result in the birth of a child. But what I'm saying is, you're saying that sex, there's something wrong with sex if it doesn't produce children or reinforce the marriage bond.
Right.
But then how can you say that there's something wrong, that masturbation is permissible if masturbation obviously is not going to create a child?
Yeah, I think marriage is society's way to create this separate institution where they say, this is what we hold as a virtue. Yes, every day we fall short, and people fall short in so many different other ways. But I think that if you personally fall short in some moral sphere, as we all do, that doesn't take the right of you to argue.
All right. I want you to stay there. I want to bring in some other voices, and we'll continue. Stay there if you will.
Okay. So what did you make of that? You want to hear the rest? How do you think they did? How do you think I did? No, seriously. What do you? Yeah. Please.
My name is Joanna.
Yeah.
The young woman had a little trouble avoiding the second person.
Even in the follow-up?
Yes.
But did you think she was being uncivil? Was she being disrespectful, or was that within the bounds? Was that okay?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And what about the first version, the raw version? Was that okay too?
Well, it was very pointed. It was very challenging.
Right.
And not everybody might have, probably a lot of people would have felt very uncomfortable being put on the spot to answer that question.
And do you think that the student she was addressing felt uncomfortable being put on the spot?
Well, he said he wanted to answer the question.
He did, yeah. That was pretty impressive. He hung in there. He did. Others, yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Martin Gallardo. I think the first question was a fallacy ad hominem, like it was more like a direct attack to the young man.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I think both managed to argue under this kind of fallacy, which happens all the time in this kind of debates. And I think the way you managed to guide the conversation was pretty well done.
I showed this to some Harvard alumni, and one person there said that I shouldn't have intervened at all in the first place. I should have just let it go.
I think as a teacher, everyone has this moral obligation to try to guide the conversation. See if there's some kind of risk, the debate going in an abrupt,
right.
You shouldn't intervene.
Yeah. Did people feel there was a risk of it unraveling at the beginning, or what did you think? Toward the back.
My name is David. Why did you intervene? Why didn't you? What was your thinking at the?
Because I thought I didn't want it to unravel, and
you
yet
had seen
I thought.
Before?
I thought. What's that?
You had seen that scenario play out before in ways that weren't.
No. But I'm always alert to try to guide it, but without suppressing any of the arguments. And I thought that Hannah had a powerful argument by analogy, because Mark was making we had been studying Aristotle. This is the background, who says that justice depends on reasoning from the telos, or the purpose of a social practice. And the debate about same-sex marriage was a wonderful illustration of that Aristotelian way of moral reasoning. And Mark was making a teleological argument about the purpose of human sexuality. And she, Hannah, was challenging him on whether, according to his account of the purpose, that it's for the sake of procreation, other practices, including masturbation, would be morally impermissible. So I thought both of them were arguing pretty effectively within the same terms and in ways that illustrated the broader point, the philosophical point that I was hoping they would grapple with. So I thought they both, my thought was I wanted to let this play out, and I thought her follow-up was effective, and he had a pretty strong rejoinder. It isn't easy. You imagine, he knew that his view in that setting of 900 or 1,000 people was shared maybe only by a dozen others, not many others. And so it takes a lot of courage to stand up in front of 1,000 of your classmates with a view that is not held by most people, especially on such a fraught question as sex and same-sex marriage. So that was my thinking when I wanted to guide it a little bit, but to let it go on. Other observations? Yes.
My name is Susan. I'm just curious.
Susan, yeah.
The perception I had, he was coming from a religious point of view,
yes,
as opposed to a philosophical. So would you have considered asking him how would he feel if religion was not part of his point of view?
Well, that wasn't the question that occurred to me, or that I wanted to present, because, and this raises a really important question about whether religiously informed views have an appropriate place in a classroom, but for that matter, in democratic public discourse. And this in itself is a debate among philosophers. Certain liberal political philosophers say the answer is no, that public discourse should not draw upon religious arguments, because in pluralist societies we disagree about religion. Others, and I'm among them, think that's a mistake, that's too narrow a constraint on legitimate public discourse. So I've argued in what I've written, but also embodied in the way I teach moral reasoning, that moral argument should be open to all comers. So I wouldn't quite say that though his argument had a religious source, it was unphilosophical, because he wasn't simply asserting a dogma. He was connecting a certain conception of the telos of sex to his view about whether same-sex marriage should be permitted. And because he was doing that, I thought it was legitimate and actually a good and important use of a religiously informed view, not insulated from counter-argument by those who didn't share that religious view. That's important, which is why Hannah's response, I thought, was effective, She was accepting, taking his premise seriously, rather than saying, I'm not going to listen to a religious argument, and asking if he could apply it or would apply it consistently. So I thought that was had a lot of pedagogical value. I would like to show you now a clip, not from a classroom setting, but from a public setting, also on a fraught question that we oftentimes, of a kind that we often think is not susceptible of reasoned public debate. It has to do with rape and violence against women. The background to the discussion I'm about to show you was that several years ago, might have been 7 or 8 years ago, there was a heinous rape committed in Delhi, in India. It captured public attention. It led to massive a social movement, protests in the streets, demanding greater protection for women from sexual violence. It led to the establishment of a commission to study what the laws should be and the enforcement mechanisms should be to reduce violence against women and rape. And the debate that we had, this is a debate that took place in Jaipur, India, in an outdoor tent with about 1,000 people. We recorded it for a BBC program that I do called The Public Philosopher, which takes controversial public questions and invites people to debate them. The video, so the question was whether rape should be treated by the law and by society as on a par with other violent physical attacks, or whether rape should be treated as a special kind of crime. And this question drew surprisingly sharp disagreement among the audience. The majority in the audience were women, not by design, but that's who showed up. And as you listen to their arguments, it's worth considering whether you think this kind of debate could easily be carried out in this country, whether we can imagine such a debate. So let's have a look at the clip about them.
Hi, I'm Sucheta, and I'm from Bombay. And I think both rape and the selection of male children are both the manifestation of the fact that we are a sexually repressed society. That's what makes women think that if I lose my virginity, I've lost my life. Rubbish. If I lose my hand, I've lost my livelihood. Nobody looks at it as seriously. Why not? If I am the only daughter of my parents and I'm expected to look after them in their old age, I need to have my hands to look after them. I don't need my virginity. I wouldn't place that. I wouldn't play to the male requirement for virginity. I think it is a male-dominated society that makes rape such a violent crime. I don't think, and women tend to allow that to happen, and I don't agree with that.
And so, do you think that the best way of overcoming the inequality of women is to assert a parallel between rape and non-sexual violent assault?
Absolutely. I think by giving rape that kind of importance, you're denying yourself as an identity. My identity is more than my virginity. My identity is me as a person in society who can do things, create a life beyond being a virgin when I'm married. I mean,
Great.
What the hell is that?
Great. Stay there. Thank you. Hold on to the microphone. Yes. Stand
So I agree with you in part, but I disagree as well. I do believe that because I'm a woman, biologically, forceful penetration of a man into me is the most brutalist form of violence that I can possibly, my body and my being, can possibly experience as a woman. So while I agree with the part that being a virgin is not important, rape, I feel, is assaulting my being born as a woman, because being born as a woman, I do come with a vagina and I do come with a certain physical weakness. And it is this aspect that I feel is being assaulted. The second thing I feel, I don't believe that rape and other forms of violent attack, I don't feel that rape is more heinous. Sometimes I believe that if a woman is subjected to physical assault over and over again, like in her marriage, or even at a workplace, if a boss doesn't rape you, but he knows you're a woman, and so he can get away with a lot of sexual talk or whatever, I feel over time it can impact a woman and be a sort of a mental rape, if you may. So I feel that in terms of, I would put rape on par with a very, very brutal, violent attack against your very being, even beyond the physical, and only a woman can experience that.
What do you say?
Well, I don't agree with the fact that she says being a woman...
No, speak directly to her.
I don't agree, Sabina, with the fact that you say that being a woman and having a hymen is like having a weakness. No, I wouldn't let any part of my body, any one part of my body define me so completely. I agree with you when you say that rape is a heinous crime, but then so are a lot of others. And I think what you're looking at is a very narrow definition of rape. I mean, is oral sex okay? And if that's how somebody rapes you, is that okay? No, I don't think that's okay either. I'm not saying that rape is okay in any form. All I'm saying is that it's as bad as any other intent to harm an individual. I wouldn't put it on a pedestal. That's it.
What do you think? What? Anne?
I don't think it would ever happen in America, a discussion like that.
And why?
Because it was explicit, and I don't know what else to say, but...
But did you find it impressive?
Yeah, I was actually impressed that it was happening in India.
Yeah. Other impressions, yes.
I couldn't really judge. I haven't been to India, but I know it is a male-dominated society, and women, it's always rated as like the #1 place for not being safe for solo female travelers. So I think it's hard for me to grasp if these two women that we're having the discussion, if one of them is raped, are they going to still be welcomed by their families? You look at what happens in the Middle East, where they might be killed because it's bringing shame on the family. So I think we could certainly have a discussion in certain parts of this country, but I can't wrap my head around what they're saying and what the reality is. I think if someone says, do you want to lose your hand or do you want to get raped? Well, then I would probably say, I guess I want to keep my hand.
Right. Yeah. Underlying their debate, their disagreement, were competing notions of what it means to affirm the equality of women with regard, in this case, to rape. And there was a candor, an explicitness, but also an honesty that was really, as Anne was pointing out, was really striking. I mean, it was made for me for a memorable exchange. It was earnest, it was honest, it was respectful, even though it was not shying away from a terribly fraught moral and legal question. Any others on this? If not, I want to shift to another kind of debate, one that looms large today in the United States and around the world. It's about free speech and hate speech. And in fact, Planet Word has an exhibit that touches on this question. For this discussion, the format was somewhat different. It was for a BBC program called The Global Philosopher, where we assembled using a big video wall, participants from 40 or 50 countries around the world to discuss various ethical questions that arise in all of our societies. And this is interesting because though the participants were not there face-to-face, they were, in virtue of the technology, drawn from many different countries, debating the question of free speech and hate speech. So let's have a look at that one. All right, let's bring back Frankie in Vancouver, Canada. What do you say to Emma?
Emma said to express opinions and create dialogue, but that's not what hate speech does. When we're talking about things such as degrading people with certain sexualities, degrading people of certain races, degrading people of certain heights, as someone said earlier, that is not helping political discourse. That is not grasping at an opinion. That is blatant disrespect, and it harms people.
Emma?
I can understand what you're saying, but I think I'm afraid that the people that think that way and aren't allowed to express it, that they will express it in other things than words.
You're afraid of driving the hatred underground by banning its public expression. Is that it, Emma?
Yeah, I can see you can compare it to, for example, not legalizing drugs or not legalizing being from another sexuality, that people will always maintain those kinds of feelings or thoughts, and they will express them otherwise.
In Croatia, Martina.
Yes, I think that freedom of speech is completely opposite to hate speech, because hate speech often leads to violence toward exactly those people you are speaking against. So it's not only the problem of speaking against them. Hate speech really brings to violent acts.
In Mogadishu, Mariam.
Hi. I actually want to argue that hate speech is a kind of violence. As someone who's had to endure hate speech, it's something that undermines your humanity. If it's attacking you based on things that you can't change, and things that are maybe irrelevant to a discourse. For instance, I mean, as a student, I know that there's a lot of discussions around safe spaces and what should be allowed to be said in a classroom, because when you have a diverse group of students and some are being oppressed because of what some others are trying to say, you create this hostile environment where it's not an equal learning the opportunity to learn is not equal across the board.
Running through this discussion, some of the arguments for banning hate speech worry that hate speech will lead to violent acts. But Marian raised a different kind of argument, which is the speech itself undermines humanity or expresses disrespect and inflicts, I suppose you could say, a kind of harm in and of itself, intrinsically, whether or not you could show evidence that hate speech actually leads to violent acts against those being targeted. What about that, Kyung-hee?
Well, I believe that Copernicus gave offense to religion and science by challenging the position of the sun in the earth. Martin Luther King gave offense to U.S. society and norms by challenging racism. And women are giving offense to a male-dominating society by challenging inequality. And when you say protection, you assume that the people are weak and cannot defend themselves. But shielding women from misogyny or shielding ethnic minorities from racism, isn't that paternalistic rather than being progressive?
All right, let's bring Frankie in Vancouver back to the screen to reply to Kyung-hee.
I'm absolutely shocked because I feel that academic discussion gets in the way of reality and truth. And if Marian is on a subway in Somalia and someone shouts at her for the head garment that she is wearing, that is not helpful, Kyung from South Korea. That is not leading to her to feel empowered. That is not discourse. That is hate speech, and that is disgusting. Do not say what Martin Luther King said when he was protesting for his rights was hate speech, because what we are discussing is if a person should be able to degrade someone on their ethnicity, on their sexuality, on the way that they look. And I believe that what Marion chooses to wear because of the color of her skin should never be a reason to put hate speech against her.
Kyung-hee.
But I believe that offensive speech can only be defeated by more free speech, not limiting offensive speech. Therefore, free speech should not be limited, but rather expanded.
Marion.
I think we're confusing being offensive and like hate speech with just being disruptive. If you have a controversial idea, but you substantiate it really well, that doesn't make it hate speech, and that isn't something that we're arguing about being banned. But when someone's being attacked on the basis of something they can't change and it's not contributing to a dialogue or actually furthering anything, then that in itself is damaging and hate speech.
Versus hate speech. What do you think of this discussion? Yes.
Hi, I'm JoJo. Interestingly enough, I was on at the Capitol Jewish Museum when the shooting happened, so I'm just viscerally experienced the deadly consequences of the normalization of radicalization. So this is a lot to process. I will say what I loved at the end is the way that Marion pushed everyone to define their terms, and that was what stuck out to me at the end. Is that you can't even have an argument if you're not defining it the same way.
Right. And do you think that Marion had the better argument in the end?
I personally did, but I don't know what bias I might bring to that. But I think it really almost made my eyes water up when she was talking about how did she phrase it? That hate speech is dehumanizing. Yeah. So whether it leads to violence or not, the words themselves are dehumanizing.
Right. So there can be speech intrinsic harm, you think?
Yes.
As she thinks. Yes.
Hi, this is Andres. My question is, or my impression is, that it also depends on what you define as hate speech. Yeah. Because you can engage in a slippery slope, right? And then you start limiting speech, and at what point do you actually stop? Who gets to define what is harmful and what is not? Right. And that will change with time, right? Just like now we get women to vote, but it was not the case, 60 years ago. So who gets to define what is hate and what is free speech? And to me, that's a big question right
And
there.
do you think that Kyung-hee, the woman from South Korea, was giving too broad a definition of hate speech as whatever someone is offended by?
To me, what I would challenge is who gets to decide what is what, right? Yeah. Especially when it is not obvious to everyone what is hate and what is not hate. Because what can be harmful to you might not be harmful to me, and I might be even the victim of hate speech. Let's say if I'm Jewish or if I'm another minority, I could be the victim directly, and I might not find harmful something that is not harmful to a person who doesn't even belong to that minority.
And would you conclude from that there should not be restrictions or legal prohibitions on hate speech?
I don't really have an argument there. I just say it's really important to answer what is what and who gets to define it.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yes.
I was struck hearing them talk. They're making such great points and pulling apart distinctions. I'm trying to think of what does it take to enable that kind of discussion outside of a formal setting like you're creating there?
Well, that's a good question. What, do you have some idea?
Well, it's like most of the conversations we're in don't have that formal structure. So what comes to mind is, okay, if I'm in that conversation, what can I do to enable that or at least promote it? I may not be able to make it happen, but I can invite the other person to participate in certain ways.
Yeah. Well, that raises, what's your name?
Stephen.
Stephen, you're raising a broader question that goes back to really the starting point, which is how to cultivate discussions and debates on hard questions, hard conversations, like the one we just saw on free speech and hate speech, or some of the earlier ones. The examples I've shown, though they've not all been classroom settings, they have had a certain structure. That's true. And so what about the rest of civic life if we're floundering and struggling to reason together what kind of structures or institutions do we need? And that's not an easy question to answer, but it is a question that goes to the heart of our topic, which is hard conversations and how to overcome our polarization. Is there someone who would like to address that broader question? What do you think?
So my name is Jeff. I had a question for you, which is the examples that you've shown, I think, demonstrate the value of having a mediator, a third party. And so since you've obviously done this a lot, I wondered if you'd ever done this in political debate. Like, it seems as though recently the moderators have kind of gotten trampled.
Right.
But maybe you have some advice about how to maintain the structure of that kind of situation, because that is like a real situation that we actually have that could potentially be strengthened.
The problem with the kinds of political debates that we have now between candidates is they aren't really discussions. They're not set up to follow a line of argument and to reply to an argument and to offer a counter-argument. There's really basically an exchange, a contest of prefabricated sound bites. So what that suggests is that to invigorate the terms of public discourse, we need a morally more robust kind of public discourse than the kind to which we've become accustomed. I think the media has an important role to play to create venues, structures, to go back to Stephen's point, that can enable reasoned argument and counter-argument, where people are actually listening to one another and trying to respond, and maybe even sometimes being open to being persuaded. We don't have very much of that. So I think we need to create, and this also addresses Stephen's point about, well, how could we do this writ large? We need to create forums for public discourse beyond what cable news and the networks offer. And they do need to have a certain kind of structure, not too intrusive, because that's the balance. That if an argument is going well, however passionate the disagreements, but where people are listening and trying to respond, that's a good thing. And I don't think we should shy away from it out of fear of disagreement or controversy. But it does require, well, it requires a certain kind of structure and guidance, but what it also requires are certain habits and capacities and civic virtues, ultimately, which means that not only the media, but also higher education has to do a better job, not only of creating forums, but of equipping young people to do this, to think together, to reason together, to argue together, to persuade and to be persuaded. Because in addition to the structure, there has to be the cultivation of habits and the civic capacity to do this, including the capacity to listen. I want to conclude with one, I've shown you some conversations, hard conversations, some of which have their awkward moments, but that's not a reason not to engage in them. Sometimes, setting up a question, sometimes it goes better than expected. If the momentum, and this goes to the habits and the spirit of the discussion, if the habits of the participants and of the willingness to listen of the interlocutors, it goes well, so can the argument. So I want to end with, this is from a series of programs that I did for Dutch public television with a group of 20 and 30-somethings from Europe and the US. We gathered them in an ancient Greek amphitheater near Athens in the spirit of Socrates. And the question that I put to them in the clip I want to show you is to do with AI. Socrates didn't address that directly. And whether if AI matchmaking could get good enough and could give you a short list of the 3 best lifelong partners for you, whose list would you trust more? The list provided by the AI app or the list of the 3 best contenders for you provided by your mom? And I put that to these 20 and 30-somethings. And listen to the way they carried out that discussion for the last clip. Asha, you say you go with the app.
Yes,
why is
because
that?
he knows every character, perspective of yourself.
Yeah.
He knows you well
Yes,
as you are.
yes.
So I think he can search for a better match than my parents who will see me at home or when I'm visiting them. Even though they raised me up, there was a time that I left home and created my own life. There's a life at home and a life outside of home.
Yeah.
So I don't think they are totally capable of searching somebody who fits me in both situations.
But the app doesn't have that gut feeling. And I want to connect with a woman on a spiritual level. And the app can't feel that. So we
Your parents do?
Trust me, my mama. Trust me. My mama knows these type of things. She knows me from the inside out. So if I come home with a girl, she would notice in like 2 seconds, no, this is not good for you.
But I think the question is, and being a mama boy as well, I think the question is there any space for a mistake? Even in choosing a partner to marry, is there any space for imperfection? Because this thing works very well. It's not the algorithms that we have now. It finds the exact perfect match. But don't we want to leave something out of that perfection for something as big as marriage?
Well, I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship, but if you have a perfect match, then the mistakes start happening, right? So I mean, so there's plenty of room for mistakes if you have a good connection.
And that's what I'm saying. Like I am married, and I don't know if a perfect robot would have found exactly my wife. She would have landed top 3.
But I think if it helps you find, this is going to sound very clinical, but a list of potential partners that have a good match, it helps it because it takes away a lot of the clutter of finding somebody who you have a good connection with.
Is that actual clutter, or that's part of what we call love dating?
What about the sexual part? How will the machine know if that's a click? I mean,
how will your parents know? And that too could grow. That too will
No, but what I mean is there's got to be a personal connection, I guess, or some kind of thing, because the machine will never know.
But I think Sergio's question underlies, if you take away all the foraging and the searching, you take away a lot of human experience, because you miss all the mistakes and wrong dates and the wrong things. So I might have actually switched back
but
to...
But there's something Sergio said, I don't know whether this app would have my partner in that top 3. So it makes me doubting right now when I would go for that machine.
You're changing your mind.
I don't know. I'm really, because of his argument, because I'm thinking, I'm married. Would that machine pick this guy that I'm married to? I don't know.
So what was so powerful about that last moment was, here was an argument in very good spirits where there was some changing of minds. The best arguments are not necessarily the ones that persuade, but that at least are conducted in a spirit and with enough listening so that sometimes an argument can change one's mind. Reasoning together at its best allows for the possibility of persuading and being persuaded. And Ashar acknowledged at the end that maybe she was changing her mind in the light of the arguments she heard. It's easy to despair at the hollow terms of our public discourse, at the polarization, at the shouting matches, at the partisan rancor. What gives me hope that we can do better is that everywhere I go, in the classroom, but also in public settings, I find that there is a hunger, especially among young people, for a better kind of public discourse, one that engages with, rather than seeks to avoid, the different moral and even spiritual convictions that different people in our pluralist societies bring to public life. There is a hunger to reason together in public about big moral questions that matter. And given, admittedly, the right structure and the right occasion, people want to do it, especially the rising generation want to engage in this. So that gives me hope for our civic life, even at a time when hope seems not to be in plentiful supply. Thank you all very much.